Today we're digging into Dion Rosser's Living Off the Grid. Now, just to be clear, this isn't a summary or a how-to guide. Think of it as a compressed structural companion to our deep dive. We're going to analyze homesteading as a fascinating case study in competing systems architecture. This is all about the structure.
And we're going to follow a really clear structural path. First, we'll define the main system people are reacting to. Then we'll look at why they want to disconnect, what they end up building, how that new system actually survives, and finally, how it all reconnects back to the bigger world.
Okay, so first things first, to even understand what it means to go off-grid, we have to get really clear about the system people are trying to replace.
So what exactly is the grid? You know, the term started with the electrical network, but it's become shorthand for something much, much bigger. It's a whole way of life that's fundamentally dependent on these huge remote infrastructures and public utilities.
The source defines the grid as this whole bundle of services we usually just take for granted. We're talking about the power lines, the water from the tap, public sewers, natural gas, and even the supermarket, which is a massive centralized food supply chain. All of it together forms this incredibly complex web of dependencies that pretty much defines modern life.
So what's the incentive to disconnect? I mean, why would anyone want to unplug from this system that's, let's be honest, incredibly convenient? Well, the book lays out some pretty clear logic.
At its absolute core, the main driver is this powerful push for complete self-reliance. This quote from the book really captures that spirit, doesn't it? It's all about creating a life where your survival doesn't hinge on some distant, complicated network that you have zero control over.
Of course, the motivations are layered. You've got people wanting pure self-sufficiency, others are focused on sustainability or being prepared for when systems fail. For some, it's about a healthier lifestyle or environmental responsibility, and for many, yeah, the ultimate goal is just to escape the system entirely.
So when someone actually acts on these incentives, what happens? The predictable outcome, really, is that they start to build a whole alternative system, one piece at a time.
And this brings us to a really useful structural metaphor. Try thinking of the grid like a giant, centralized mainframe computer. It's doing all the heavy processing for our essential needs, right? In that model, a homestead becomes an independent terminal. It's a self-contained unit that runs its own local programs for things like power, water, food, and waste.
Building this independent terminal is all about systematically replicating the mainframe's key services, just on a much smaller, local scale. So municipal water gets replaced by wells, the power grid gets replaced by solar panels, public sewers are swapped for septic systems, and supermarkets get replaced by gardens and livestock.
And this right here, this reveals the central crisis in perception around off-grid living. The myth is that it's this on or off switch, a total binary break from society. But the reality described in the book is that it's a spectrum. It's a whole flexible range, from just doing a little bit of homesteading all the way to full self-sufficiency.
So how does this alternative system, this resilient little microgrid, actually manage to stick around? What makes it work over the long haul?
Well, a huge reason the model persists is because it's not some rigid all-or-nothing ideology. It's a flexible, scalable strategy. You can start small with what the author calls a half-and-half approach. The definition of success is adaptable. And crucially, it lets people create their own little economic loops, like selling surplus veggies at a farmer's market. And by its very design, it's less vulnerable to a single point of failure in the big public grid.
But here's the really crucial point. These so-called independent terminals, they almost never operate in a total vacuum. And this leads us to the final and maybe the most surprising piece of our analysis, the ways they stay connected to the larger system.
When you dig in, you see this much more nuanced picture. Homesteads keep these critical connections to the very system they're trying to gain independence from. They use satellite internet for information. They participate in local commerce. Sometimes they even sell extra power back to the grid. They rely on fuel deliveries, and the initial setup itself, the tools, the supplies, that's all bought from the mainstream economy.
So this leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? If total independence is basically an illusion, what does off-grid really mean? Well, maybe it's not about total separation at all. Perhaps it's really about renegotiating our relationship with that centralized infrastructure. It's less of an escape and more of a re-architecture, creating a more distributed, more resilient network of both mainframes and independent terminals. Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.